So all we hear about in the news is how Donald Trump, president of the USA, has imposed tariffs on most of the world, including South Africa. He increased the tariffs on South Africa to 30%. But do you know that we charge the US 60% on their products that come into South Africa? Now that doesn't stop us from buying Levi jeans or drinking Jack Daniel's whiskey or making liberal use of Tabasco. We pay the price. Built into the price, it's there. Now, tariffs have been around for centuries, and tariffs serve two major roles. One is that it's a tax, so in other words, it's money that comes into the fiscus, and governments love making money, so they make money out of tariffs, and it's a nice, relatively easy tax to collect. So that's the first role that tariffs does. But the other one that most countries use tariffs for is to protect their homegrown industries. Why would you want to protect your homegrown industries? Well, there's a story that doesn't get a lot of airplay. We all remember those deep, dark days of COVID when there was a toilet paper shortage. Well, the toilet paper shortage was actually as a result of the fact that Australia no longer produces its own toilet paper. It imports all of its toilet paper from China, and at that point in time, they imported from China and Indonesia, and from that point in time, there was concern that there wouldn't be shipping and they would run out of toilet paper, and the next thing, the Aussies started to go and buy toilet paper everywhere, and the news spread through social media, and suddenly everybody was stockpiling toilet paper. But it just goes to show you don't want to be in a country where suddenly your supplier of something like toilet paper can't supply it to you. So you put tariffs on toilet paper importers so that at least somebody can still produce toilet paper locally and be competitive, and your toilet paper plants don't close down. That's the basic idea of tariffs, to protect local industries. In South Africa, our best example of that is our auto production industry, where we all know down in the Eastern Cape we make a whole lot of cars, and just north of Pretoria we make cars. And the other thing that we know about motor vehicles is that they are very expensive in South Africa. On average, we pay about 30% more for our vehicles than what they cost in Europe. And that's because we've got high tariffs. We are quite a high cost producer, but because they are protected by tariffs, these auto producers can produce cars in South Africa. Why would the government do it? Well, it is an employer of more than 115,000 people countrywide in our vehicle manufacturing industry. So it's an industry kind of like, you do the sums, it's possibly worth protecting. Otherwise, we'd have even more unemployed people. Now, the world is moving towards tariffs. Basically, what that means is that America, who is a very big importer of all manner of things, had very, very low tariffs. And now America has just risen up to meet what the rest of the world charges. This is not going to stop. In fact, what it's going to do is it's going to show the glaring differences. And boy, are there some glaring differences. Remember I said we charge America 60% import duties or tariffs on the stuff that they send here? We charge China 12%, 50% less. That means that, we get Chinese goods very, very, very cheaply in South Africa. And that is why we have seen, and we've heard everybody moan about it, this dramatic deindustrialization of South Africa. It is deindustrialized because people that produce certain things in South Africa just couldn't compete with the cheaper imports coming from places like China. And it's not only China. We've also got, in various industries, other countries that send us stuff. And we don't charge very high tariffs on that. And it makes some of the South African produced stuff uncompetitive, and those factories close down. That is the so-called deindustrialization of South Africa. An example that always gets trotted out is that South Africa used to have quite a big textiles industry. where we made everything from t-shirts to socks to blankets. We produced these things. The quality was okay, but the price was quite high. Pretty soon you can import that stuff cheaper, and the next thing, the factory goes out of business and more people are unemployed. And in many cases, those people have never ever found a job again. These people have been unemployed. The golden days for all of this was in the early 90s, when suddenly South Africa was open to the world. And suddenly, when we came back into the global economy, there was China selling us all manner of things. And we are China's China. So we have never, ever wanted to charge them high tariffs. Now, there's an opportunity for South Africa here. And the opportunity is, if everybody's going to start charging tariffs, maybe this is the opportunity for us to reindustrialize parts of the South African economy. And by that, I mean, if you're going to raise the Chinese tariff to something that resembles what we charge the Western world, then maybe it could make sense to open that textile factory again. But in order to do that, two things have to be in place, because there's two things that are stopping us from reindustrializing South Africa. Even if tariffs and a new world suddenly gives us the opportunity to do it and make it worthwhile. Number one is a very, very political thing, and that is that what are the chances that we get a government that says to China, sorry, we are going to introduce tariffs? You know, and this is a bigger problem than we think, and we can prove it, because just recently there was a controversy last year with those online retailers, Temu and Shein, who were selling things into South Africa and they weren't paying any duties or taxes. None of the South African competitors, be it brick and mortar companies or be it online retailers, could compete because they were getting undercut by a dramatic amount. And SARS bent themselves into a pretzel. They did flick-flacks. The government did everything they could to try and delay the process to at least leveling the playing field so that Temu and Shein would pay the same as our local retailers were paying. And eventually, apparently, they did. But it took a lot. And even the South African market, you'd imagine suddenly you're going to pay more for the stuff. Nobody wants to do that. So nobody willingly pays for the tariff. But it had to come, and it came. And, but what I'm saying here is, if they couldn't, on such a small issue like that, tell China, no, sorry, we need a level playing field even for the South African economy. But let's hope that somebody in government, gets a spine, and then we can start protecting some of our industries, because we've got a dramatic problem. We've got like 50% unemployment. We need to deal with this. So the first problem is stand your ground. South Africa is a country that should be protected, and I hate to use that word because we've come out of an era where there wasn't that much protection, and it's been nice. We've been able to buy all sorts of cheap stuff, but it's cost us jobs. So the first thing we need is the political will for us to put those kind of tariffs on a country like China, where we get so much of our imports from. And we do understand that some of our comrades really like the Chinese, and sometimes the ruling party might get into a cash crisis, and then suddenly the cash crisis disappears. And you'd imagine that might be linked to the lack of will to impose tariffs, but that's a separate issue. The second thing that stops us from reindustrializing in this country is some really, really bad economic policy. And here I have in mind our old friend, Black Economic Empowerment, BEE. Now, let me explain to you why BEE would be a real impediment towards reindustrializing the country. South Africa has got some really well-educated, talented, entrepreneurial black people that should be the people to start these industries. But why would you do that if you can take a cushy government job or a cushy corporate job paying you a lot of money without any risk? Who is the person who's going to go and start that textile factory and have to deal with load shedding, have to deal with crime and theft, have to deal with our ridiculous labor laws, labor unions, right? Who's going to do that? Why wouldn't you rather just go and work for the corporate or work for government and get paid your millions every year without ever taking a risk? And some of our best and brightest talent is being thrown right out of business where it could really matter, where they could open a factory that would employ many people. Instead, they're being forced into these jobs that offer them these big salaries and a certain amount of security, but no risk. So the model is all wrong. These people are the people most likely to start factories that make the South African version of Levi jeans or Jack Daniel's whiskey or Tabasco sauce that we could then export. Which brings us to the third leg of the problem. Let's just say you do start this factory and now you start creating this product and it's a real winner. In fact, it's so good that people overseas are prepared to pay the tariff that they would have to pay just to get your product. Well, now you're going to have to find your way of getting that product to your client who's now in some far-flung place, corner of the globe. Where's that train that's going to take your stuff to the port? Well, the train doesn't exist anymore because the rails got stolen. Then let's just say you get it to the port. Then you're going to go to some of the world's worst ports and wait for months before your stuff gets loaded on a ship. Then you're going to hope the stuff doesn't get stolen and you're going to hope that it reaches its destination. Logistics matter. And we have done everything in our power to disrupt that logistics system. And that's why we can't get these things to export the way that we should be doing it. If you're unsure as to whether South Africa should reindustrialize, just go to the East Rand here in Gauteng and have a look at how many factory sites are open. Go to Gqeberha, go to Durban, city of Tshwane. Do you know that in Paris, we used to have 2 factories producing stockings and pantyhose that all South Africans bought and we exported them? Paris. Now it's just got a few guest houses and a smelly river. What we really need to do is we need to reindustrialize. We need to rethink where South Africa is. There's an opportunity that waits for us, but we need the political understanding. We need politicians that understand our business work, not the current lot of politicians that we've got who have never sold a vetkoek in their life. How do they understand how a factory works, how logistics lines work, how we can get to be globally competitive? South Africa has got a wonderful opportunity now, whether we like it or not, to quote our president, his favorite saying of the moment, to reindustrialize, but I fear we're going to miss this opportunity like we miss all the other opportunities. At least there's one company that's not missing the opportunity, and that's Pace Car Rental. They're running a great business. Go rent a car from Pace Car Rental. Use the code SONA, S-O-N-A, to get a discount when you rent your car. Thank you so much for watching us. And we'll see you again on the State of the Nation update. Thank you for joining me.